no, we really are in the middle of playoff season. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Scoreboard. 844 Studio 4 is the phone number if you want to be a part of the show. I'm your host, Joe Berg. We're going to be talking sports for the next hour here, and if you want to call up and be a part of the show, you absolutely can do that. 844-788-3464. I don't know how to break this news to you guys, so we're just going to jump right into it. Before we get through the rundown of today's show and then circle back to high school, we're going to start at high school. The baseball, high school varsity baseball 4A state championship playoffs. Round number one, most of the games were taking place last night. Well, Lake Norman backed their way into the playoffs as a 29 seed. Now, they're a good team. They just had a rough year. Their rough schedule, lost some games that they probably should have won. So they ended up the 29 seed in the playoffs, and they draw the number 4 seed. That would be Reagan High School out of Pfafftown, North Carolina. I have no clue if I'm saying that correctly or not. Pfafftown, North Carolina, over by Winston-Salem. I had to look this up. Over by Winston-Salem. So yesterday, the game between Reagan and Lake Norman goes into the 7th inning with Lake Norman with a commanding 7-4 lead. The inning moves along. The Reagan team loads the bases. Lake Norman gets 2 outs. 3-2 count. Next pitch, a grand slam. Reagan High School wins 8-7 on a first round walk-off grand slam, down 3 with 2 outs and a 3-2 count. I'm getting chills thinking about that. Oh, that's like what you dream of right there. So unfortunately, Lake Norman High School, they got eliminated from the first round of the playoffs. They should have advanced, let's be honest. Giving up a walk-off grand slam in the bottom of the 7th inning, yeah, you kind of deserve to win that one. It just wasn't meant to be. Lake Norman was able to capitalize on 3 errors by the Reagan Raiders, and they went into that 7th inning with a lead. It was 2-2 going into the 5th before Lake Norman scored 4 to take a lead, and then they scored 1 more in the 6th. That gave them the 7-4 lead. But a walk-off grand slam, full count, 2 outs in the Lake Norman Reagan High School baseball first round playoff game. Look, a big congratulations. The player, Charlie Stogner. So, Charlie, if you're listening, I don't know if you are or not. Man, congratulations. A walk-off grand slam, 3-2 count, 2 outs. I'm watching the video because Reagan's high school, they have an athletics page where they post some of this information. Everybody's going absolutely bonkers in the stands. I don't blame them. A walk-off, I'm going to say it again, a walk-off grand slam, down 3, 2 outs, and a 3-2 count. That's baseball playoffs for you right there. Anything can happen, I guess. So congratulations, Reagan. And unfortunately for Lake Norman, they were eliminated from the first round of the playoffs. We'll have to see what they can do next year. There were also other schools that were playing in the first round. It was a big day, not only for baseball, but also for lacrosse yesterday, as we had a lot of high school action. So we're going to get to all of that coming up here shortly. We're also going to talk about live golf. Yeah, maybe. there's some news there. I don't know if anybody really cares about Live Golf. I know the controversy with the PGA and Live and 3 rounds of golf versus 4 rounds of golf and teams and Saudi Arabia backed league and all that fun stuff, So there's controversy there. But we will talk about that if we have time. We're also going to talk about Shohei Ohtani and his ex-interpreter, Ippei Mizuhara. There's some news in the legal case over there. The NHL playoffs continued last night. The Carolina Hurricanes and New York Rangers went to double overtime. Carolina, stop me if you heard this one in game 1. Carolina looked like the better team. But the New York Rangers score the power play goal in double overtime, putting the Carolina Hurricanes in a 2-0 hole. We also had NBA playoffs yesterday. We also have NBA awards. We have finalists for these awards. MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. We also have the winners of some of these where we're still waiting for the MVP, which will be announced tonight at 7:30 on TNT. There's also an update in IndyCar. Yesterday, it was announced that there would be some punishments for Team Penske. Now, I believe that these are internal punishments. I don't believe that these are IndyCar punishments. From the way I read the article and the way I was understanding it, it was after an internal review by Penske, and they decided to take action. Why? I got a few ideas. We will get to that. We're also going to see if we have time to talk about NASCAR heading to Darlington this weekend for the throwback weekend of the Goodyear 400, not the Southern 500. The Southern 500 comes up later in the year. This one is the throwback weekend, which me personally, a little side note here, I wish they would have kept throwback weekend during the Southern 500 weekend. To me, it made a lot more sense because you have all of the hype and festivities around it being the Southern 500, old broadcasters being there. They moved all that stuff to the throwback weekend because it makes more sense. And I get it. They don't want to take away from the importance of that Southern 500 race in terms of playoffs and whatnot. But I still wish the throwback weekend was during the Southern 500 and not the 400-mile race this coming weekend. So that's on tap for today. Don't miss any of the show here today. We got a good one in store for you. We're going to head to our first commercial break, but when we return, we're going to talk about the rest of high school baseball playoffs and lacrosse playoffs. Man, Lake Norman, I feel bad for you today. I do. You had the game 1, a walk-off, grand slam, bottom of the 7th inning, 2 outs, 3-2 count, and Lake Norman is eliminated. Other schools still moving on, though, so we'll talk about that on the other side of this break. Don't go anywhere. We're back after this.
More of Sports Director Joe Berg's The Scoreboard is coming up on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Well, it's a toasty one today as we work our
The Scoreboard with your host, Sports Director Joe Berg on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is segment number 2 here on the Scoreboard. 844 Studio 4. That's 844-788-3464. Call me up if you want to chat. We're talking high school playoffs. We're going to go baseball and lacrosse here today. I started the show by telling you about what happened to Lake Norman High School. Walk-off grand slam, and they are eliminated. Not only was it a walk-off grand slam, they were down 3, it was a 3-2 count, and there were 2 outs. Man, that is something else. I'm curious to see if Reagan's going to be able to go on a run now, because they escape a game there. Now, Reagan's no slouch. They're the 20th ranked team in the state of North Carolina. Lake Norman had a good year, just not great. They're a good team. They just lost more games than they should have, and that is why they were matched up against Reagan as a 29 seed to begin with. But we're going to go back all the way to 1A baseball before we talk any more 4A, because I want to let you know about the games last night and some more games in round 1 coming up today. Like Christ the King down in Huntersville, they play Hiwassee Dam High School tonight at 5 o'clock. So there should be a first pitch that already happened. Now, I don't have any score updates for you on this one, but obviously we'll talk about it more tomorrow. Some of the schools that won: number 1, Mount Airy took care of business against Langtree Charter, and number 17, Highland Tech beat number 16, East Wilkes. So Highland Tech will take on Mount Airy. You have Cherryville beating Mitchell High School 15-0. And like I said, Christ the King will be playing later on today. That's really all of the local schools in 1A. Langtree Charter down there in Mooresville was the 32 seed, and they got eliminated in the first round by the number 1 seed. So I can't be too mad about that, you know. Hey, you got beat by the 1 seed. What are you going to do? And we'll continue covering 1A, but just know that the extremely local schools here in our listening area, they are not in the 1A playoffs. As far as 2A goes, we did have quite a few games last night. Lincoln Charter moving on as an 8 seed, beating Brevard High School. You also have, East Davidson is who won last night as well. Number 10, East Davidson, beating Reedsville. Now, today also, and this game is going on right now because it was supposed to be a first pitch of 4 o'clock. You have West Wilkes taking on West Davidson, the West Davidson Dragons, that is, over in Lexington. The 1 seed Burns beat East Burke 6-1, and the 2 seed East Rutherford beat Henderson 6-1. So the top 2 seeds in the East in 2A baseball brackets are moving on. A lot of games tonight still to go in the 2A baseball playoffs. You have Pine Lake, number 20, taking on West Stokes. That game is 7 o'clock tonight. At 6:30 tomorrow, you'll have Community School of Davidson, who is number 21 over in Davidson, taking on RS Central. So round number 1 continuing not only tonight, but also into tomorrow, as we do have a game scheduled on Thursday between RS Central and Community School of Davidson. As far as the 3A brackets go, Lake Norman Charter, number 13, playing number 20 Atkins High School. They won that game 7-1 to move on. Now they'll be taking on Crest High School, who went into the playoffs as a 29 seed and came out victorious against number 4 South Point, who was ranked really well and really high in the state of North Carolina. Crest, they had a losing record this year. They were 500 in conference, and they were ranked in the mid-200s in the state of North Carolina. That is a big upset right there. So Lake Norman Charter will be taking on Crest High School in round number 2. Number 1, East Rowan beat West Mecklenburg 11-0, and number 2, West Henderson beat Ashboro 3-0 as well. So your top 2 seeds in the 3A still moving on. We have more games coming up tonight and into tomorrow, again, in the 2A brackets. We're going to continue to keep you updated on those as well. And for the 4A, just to kind of wrap it all up, South Iredell was the other school that was in action that we talk about every day. Besides Lake Norman, they also lost their matchup against number 9 Ragsdale. So Ragsdale will be taking on Hopewell High School, the number 8 ranked school over in Huntersville, as they beat Palisades High School from Charlotte 5-4, just barely coming out victorious in that one. Number 1 TC Robertson, number 2 Cuthbertson, they both win their games, pitching shutouts in that one. So all of those schools move on. And we do not have but one other game in the first round here that's going on tonight. It's going to actually be at 6 o'clock. So right after this show, the final game of the first round of the West in the 4A brackets, that would be West Forsyth, number 12, taking on Huff High School, number 21. Huff High School down in Cornelius, very much in our listening area here. So we'll update you on baseball. You know, there's not many local teams left. I told you that from the jump. We're not going to have a lot of them, maybe a couple of them here and there. It's the wider area that's really got the West baseball covered, and a little bit of Charlotte as well. So we will continue to talk about baseball, but where we really see the local athletes shining right now is in lacrosse. We are into round number 4 as the third round of the playoffs was completed last night. If you want to win a state championship in lacrosse, you only have to win 3 more games. Let's go ahead and start out in the 1-2-3A bracket. Number 1, Community School of Davidson. They beat Cornerstone Charter. I mean, they beat them 21-4. Moving on, they're going to take on Lake Norman Charter. So a little bit of a close rivalry game there, as those schools are located pretty close to each other. As Lake Norman Charter was able to beat Bradford 19-2. Pine Lake Prep, my alma mater, played Bishop McGuinness. That was a 6 seed Pine Lake versus number 3 Bishop McGuinness. And in that one, Bishop McGuinness ends up victorious with a 12-11 victory, just sneaking by Pine Lake. They'll be taking on North Lincoln, who beat Hickory High School 18-10 to move on their bracket. So your matchups, 1-4, 2-3. Pretty much went chalk there. The 4A is a little bit different, but not as different. Number 1, Charlotte Catholic. They played Myers Park, who in the state of North Carolina is ranked number 10. But we've been talking about it for the past several weeks. Charlotte Catholic is ranked 1st in North Carolina and 6th nationally for lacrosse. You might not have been able to tell with the way that they played that game last night. Charlotte Catholic barely winning 19-18, a very close game there. They're going to move on, survive. That's the name of the game in the playoffs, just win and survive. They'll be taking on number 4 Marvin Ridge, who beat R.J. Reynolds. And Mooresville High School, who won their first 2 lacrosse playoff games in school history against Asheville and T.C. Roberts, took on number 14 Weddington last night. Unfortunately for Mooresville, they were not able to come out victorious. They dropped that game 13-9, but really nothing to be upset about if you're Mooresville in that one. You won the first 2 playoff games in school history for lacrosse here this year, And that is something to be proud of. So a good run. Unfortunately, it's not going to go as far as they wanted it to for Mooresville, but congratulations to them nonetheless. Lake Norman was in action last night against Huff High School. Now, this was a closer game than you might have thought, even though Huff High School and Lake Norman are a 7 and a 2. When you look at how they're ranked nationally, boy, Huff is right behind Lake Norman. This is a very close matchup. Unlike baseball for Lake Norman, though, they were able to come out victorious in this one, squeaking by with an 11-10 win. So they'll be taking on number 14 Weddington, who's having an improbable run here. They beat number 3 Northern Guilford earlier in the playoffs. Now they'll have to take on number 2 Lake Norman. And that wraps up what happened last night in your high school playoff scene, baseball and lacrosse. We got more games coming up in the first round today for baseball, and for lacrosse, we move on to the next round. So we'll continue keeping you updated on everything going on in the world of high school playoffs. We're going to go to our next commercial break here. We're about halfway done with the scoreboard today. It's a Wednesday. A lot to talk about as we roll in closer to the weekend. But there's more news to be had, including talking about the NHL and the Carolina Hurricanes from last night. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We're back right after this.
Keep it right here. We'll have Scoreboard with Joe Berg continues now on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Everyone, welcome back. You're listening to the Scoreboard. We are going to talk about the NHL. And I'll tell you what, I watched all of the Hurricanes and the New York Rangers game last night. Round number 2. Rangers Hurricanes. Hurricanes losing game number 1, 4-3 in regulation. They were down 4-2 late, but they got a goal back to make it a 1-goal game. Still ended up with the loss. Game number 2 last night, and Carolina looked much better. Now, they did look good in game 1, and I would argue that they actually had the better opportunities in that game. But last night in game 2, man, were they the better team. And it was obvious from the start. You know, Carolina got a push early, and the Rangers scored, instantly tied up. A little later in the period, they tied it up. Then they score a goal with just a few seconds left in the first period to take a 2-1 lead into the first intermission. Well, in the second period, nothing happened. So it ends up a 4-3 overtime loss for the Carolina Hurricanes, as in the third period, the Rangers were able to score on the power play again, might I add, making it a 3-3 game. We go to overtime. Nothing happens in overtime. Overtime number 2, well, there were some things that happened, but the Rangers end up getting the game-winning goal on a Vincent Trocheck power play. Now, I have thought about this before, and if you've listened to the show for a while, when we talk MLB, we sometimes talk to one of my friends, Nick DiCostanzo, who works in MLB data operations. He brought this to my attention one time when we were in college, and it's this little concept of players always haunting and coming back to hurt the team that they played for when they play him again. So Vincent Trocheck was a Carolina Hurricane. He left the Hurricanes to go sign with the New York Rangers in free agency a couple of years ago. And here we are. We're talking about Vincent Trocheck beating the Carolina Hurricanes and winning a game for the New York Rangers in double overtime. So Carolina finds themselves down 2-0. They come back home. Tomorrow will be game number 3. There's a little bit of cause for concern, but I'm not ready to hit the panic button for the Hurricanes just yet because of one thing that we talked about going into this game, and that is their record at home versus their record on the road versus their record just at Madison Square Garden. Carolina is a much better team when they play here in Raleigh. Well, I guess it's not here. It's kind of, it's out there, a couple hours away. In Raleigh, here in North Carolina. They play much better. The winning percentage is better. Power play is better. Penalty kill is better. Everything's better. The problem is you're down 2-0. Even if you win these 2 home games and tie the series at once, Carolina is still going to have to win a game on the road. There's going to be no way for them to win this series without winning in Madison Square Garden at least one time. Now, to do this, they also have to defend home ice. And I'm not as concerned about that for the Hurricanes. They are a much better home team than a road team. We've talked about it. And I just said it earlier. I don't know what it is about being at home versus being on the road for Carolina, but they're a different team. Now, Carolina may have deserved to win this game, but that's just hockey sometimes. Igor Shesterkin, the goaltender for the New York Rangers, played lights out. 57 saves on 60 shots against. Yeah. He outplayed Freddie Anderson. And that's the difference. And I told you I said this is going to be the difference in the series. And ESPN has loved putting up this stat of 28, or maybe it's not that many. Maybe it's like 18. But I'm right. 28 consecutive games for Igor Shesterkin in the playoffs, allowing 3 or fewer goals. Meaning if the Rangers get to 4, they're probably going to win. And for Carolina and Freddie Anderson, 5 consecutive games of giving up more than 3 goals. It's not, that math doesn't math if you're Carolina. It's not good. And I don't know if it's time for a goaltender change. The way that Anderson played down the stretch in the regular season once he came back, it showed why he was brought in the first place, because he's a good goaltender. The problem is he is a streaky goaltender, and right now, he's not looking good. First goal for the New York Rangers, Alexis Lafreniere scored it, and it was a bad goal to give up. Anderson trying to look around the defense, lost the puck in the middle of the play, and left the short side of the net wide open. Overtime, it was a power play. Double overtime, it was a power play. He got the initial one. The rebound went right to Trocheck, through the 5-hole into the net. What are you going to do about that one? But if you stop the first shot, you don't even go to overtime. The Rangers also scored in the third period on a power play, and we talked about it after game number 1. Carolina has got to stop taking penalties. Now, this isn't something that is going to go away. There were 12 power plays in that game. 5 for the Hurricanes, 7 for the Rangers. And by the way, some of them weren't really power plays. They were like 2 seconds on the back end of a 4-on-4. But nonetheless, Carolina still 0 for 5 on the power play. They have not scored on the power play in this series yet. And they don't have a very good power play right now anyway to begin with. In the playoffs, they have been lacking. So I'm not ready to hit the panic button yet if you're Carolina. Just wait a little bit. If you split in Carolina, if the Rangers somehow steal one of these games, then it's time to push the panic button, because you cannot lose another game if you go down 3-0 or 3-1. You get it to 3-1, or if you get it to 2-2 and go back to New York, now it's your turn to steal one. And if you steal one in game 5, defend home ice for game 6. That's the path for Carolina. But they have to win these 2 games at home. If they lose one of these 2 games at home, they're in trouble, because the New York Rangers are a team that will make you pay for your mistakes. And we have seen it time and time again in the first game and in the second game. The game-tying goal for the Rangers, power play goal. The game-winning goal for the Rangers, power play goal. Penalties, kills got to be better for Carolina, and they got to stay out of the box. They are the better 5v5 team when there's nobody in the box, and it's clear as day. One more segment here on this Wednesday. We're going to chat NBA and IndyCar and maybe some NASCAR, and we'll get into the news of the day. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to The Scoreboard. We're back right after this.
Keep it right here.
seeing our teacher.
She's definitely accepting her award.
Now more of the Scoreboard with Joe Berg on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Welcome back. Final segment here on the Scoreboard. You got 11 minutes if you want to be a part of the program. 844 Studio 4. That's 844-788-3464. Let's jump to NASCAR here real quick. There is actually some news out of NASCAR land here. With the silly season beginning. If you know what silly season is, that's like off-season driver moves, predictions, things like that. Well, we got our first move here, it looks like. Michael McDowell is set to leave Front Row Motorsports. He will drive for Spire Motorsports in the number 71 car next year. That will be taking place 2025. Right now, Michael McDowell having an okay year. Not as good as last year, as he sits 26th in points. He's had some good runs. He's even won a stage so far this year, but the finishes haven't been there for him. Well, he is going to be taking over the 71 car, which is currently piloted by Zane Smith. And we've talked about it before. Carson Hocevar in the 77 car. He's having a very good year as his first year as a rookie. That's also a Spire Motorsports car. The 77, 71, and 7 car. So Michael McDowell set to leave Front Row Motorsports. And I'm going to say this. I am a little bit disappointed in this. I am not upset that McDowell is leaving Front Row Motorsports. I'm more upset that he's unable to get a ride with one of the top teams in NASCAR, because he's proven, at least in my eyes, he's proven to be able to win in equipment that's not as great. He won the Indy Road Course. He's won an Daytona 500. He's been competitive, and he was in the playoffs last year for that Indy Road Course win, but he put up some good numbers last year. I'm just surprised that nobody decided that they wanted to bring him in. Look, I'm not going to say this is going to happen, but if you look at Hendrick Motorsports, Alex Bowman, he hasn't been having a very good year so far this year. He's turned it around in the past 3 weeks, even in the past 5 weeks with some top 10s. He's got 4 top 10s in his last 5 races. But before that, it was 27th, 18th. He has a 17th, a 20th, 37th in Texas. It's been a real rough year for that 48 car and Alex Bowman. Is he going to keep his ride at the end of the year? I'm not sure. I'm not. You never know. But that is the news of the day out of NASCAR. Michael McDowell leaving Front Row Motorsports, going to Spire Motorsports to drive the 71 car. And this announcement comes right before Darlington Race Weekend. I personally love the Darlington races. They're usually good. I can think of a few classic ones. Even last year had some good racing. But it is also, as I said, throwback weekend this weekend, and we have a few drivers that are going to be sporting some throwbacks. Not everybody, which honestly, I think it's a shame that not everybody is doing a throwback. Austin Cindric in the 2 car, not doing a throwback. You got the 8 car of Kyle Busch, no throwback on that car. Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Chris Buescher, Martin Truex Jr., Christopher Bell, Joey Logano, Bubba Wallace, all of those drivers will not be running a throwback scheme this weekend. And honestly, I think it's a shame. If they're going to do throwback weekend, it should be required. It should, in my opinion. It should be required to run a throwback scheme. One of the drivers that's running a throwback scheme this weekend is Josh Berry, who's going to throw it back to 1998. Here's what he says about how significant it is that NASCAR is spotlighting grassroots racing during throwback weekend.
It's really cool. Like I said, more than anything, I hope as many people participate as they can. It's hard sometimes with that idea, right? We all have so many sponsors that are so incredibly important to our programs, right? And they're going to have to buy in and change up their branding and everything to make this all happen. So sometimes it's not as easy as it looks from the outside to make all this happen. But overall, it's always cool to me to see pay attention, people paying attention to that grassroots level. There's so many great tracks, around Darlington and the South Carolina area, North Carolina area that put on a lot of great racing. So any way we can do to shine a little light on that and help that side of things, I think is a plus in my eyes. Josh
Berry will be driving a throwback to crew chief Rodney Childers' it's a throwback for Rodney Childers' late model car from 1998. It's a nice looking car too. I'm just disappointed that we have so many drivers not doing throwbacks this weekend. Like I said, it should be required. If we're gonna do throwback weekend, run a throwback scheme. Be a part of the fun. I want to talk about this Live Golf news. We got a lot of news we didn't really get to today. This one's interesting, though. Live Golf on Wednesday announced a trading window to allow teams to swap players. For the first time ever in Live, the 13 teams can negotiate with each other through June 9th in an effort to improve their teams, but without altering the contracts of the traded players. This is interesting, I guess. Greg Norman, commissioner and CEO, says by opening a trade window midway through the season, all 13 teams have an opportunity to fine-tune their roster and assets, their team composition and performance. I don't watch Live Golf. To be honest, I don't really I pay attention. I know who's winning. I know who's doing good in PGA, but I don't sit down and watch the PGA Tour either. It's just there's other things going on right now. Like, I don't know. Playoffs, NASCAR, more playoffs. So that's interesting. Trading in Live Golf. I never thought I'd see trading in golf. But hey, I guess anything is possible. Shohei Ohtani's ex-interpreter Ippei Mizuhara pleads guilty to bank fraud and a tax code violation. He pled guilty Wednesday to federal charges of felony bank fraud and submitting a false tax return after authorities found that he stole nearly $17 million from Shohei Ohtani in order to pay off gambling debts to an illegal sports book. I guess that's the end of the story for Shohei. He got some money stolen, and that was it. He dodged a bullet here because I was one of them. There were a lot of people that were saying, please tell me Shohei Ohtani is not involved in gambling. Well, seems like he wasn't. And it looks like case closed as far as everybody is concerned. And finally, IndyCar. Team Penske sidelined 4 of their personnel for the Indianapolis week. This was following an internal review of the recent push-to-pass penalties levied by IndyCar. If you guys remember that story, there was a software that allowed them to improperly use the overtake system on starts and restarts. So a self-imposed penalty there by Team Penske. Interesting to me is there was an internal review. Team Penske, they decide who they're going to suspend. And the owner of Team Penske, in case you didn't know, is Roger Penske, who also owns IndyCar. I don't see how that isn't a conflict of interest if you're doing an internal review over a cheating scandal that the league that you own just levied against you, and just seems a little backwards to me. He also owns the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, in case you weren't aware. But I don't know. I find that a little weird. Conflict of interest, maybe not. All right, on this day in sports history, 2014, South Carolina outside linebacker Jadeveon Clowney, the first pick by the Houston Texans. Man, I can still remember the hit that made Jadeveon Clowney a household name. Also on this day, 2010, the last piece of Yankee Stadium falls in the Bronx, marking the end of a 2-year demolition process. Man, they tear down those old stadiums like it's nobody's business. You could still go to an apartment complex and see the home plate for Ebbets Field if you wanted to. Thanks for tuning into the Scoreboard. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. We're out of here. Until then, have a great night, everyone.
Serving you better than ever before. 105.9 100.7 WSIC, Statesville, Morrisville, North Charlotte.